Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. Every touch is a step forward. By Dexcom, take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom. And by No Foods. No grain, no gluten, no guilt.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, lawmakers are starting to take a closer look at the price of insulin. Nevada became the first to pass a law last summer, and Colorado may soon do the same.
These customers have to buy insulin. There's no other choice. And the manufacturers are selling a product that hasn't really changed that much in the actual product itself over the last 20 years for a price that's 1,200% higher than it was in the late 90s.
We talked to Colorado Representative Dylan Roberts about the bill he's put forward. It's all about transparency. We'll talk about what that means, how it could change things, and about his very personal connection to Type 1. Plus, in our community connection this week, adventurer and solo sailor Erin Spineto takes on a new challenge, making a show about Type 1. We'll explain what a bad case is all about. And know better this week, learn about efforts to open up the Omnipod. It all starts now on Diabetes Connections. Welcome to another week of the show. I am so glad to have you with us. Lots going on. If you are new, we aim to educate and inspire about Type 1 diabetes by sharing stories of connection. My son was diagnosed with Type 1 right before he turned 2. That was 11 years ago. I started the podcast in 2015. My background is in broadcasting, local news, radio, television, that sort of thing. And if you are new, please go ahead and join our Facebook group. It is Diabetes Connections, the group. If you're not on Facebook, if that's not your thing, I do send out a weekly email newsletter. You can sign up for that at diabetes-connections.com. And this week, I am really happy to be talking about the price of insulin and legislation to shed some light on why it has increased so much in the past decade. You know, this affects us all. And there is a lot of history behind this. There are a lot of opinions. There are a lot of people working on different ways to make things better. I can't cover everything in one show. And, you know, this is an ongoing issue, of course, and things are changing, but I will link up some background, some helpful articles in the show notes. So please do check that out. And again, if you're listening on any podcast app, you should be able to get to the show notes. It can be a little difficult if you're listening on social media, but everything's always at the main website. Diabetes Connections is brought to you in part by Dexcom. And when we look at the Dexcom throughout the day, as we have for more than 4 years now, it is incredibly helpful to head off highs and lows and to help us help Benny, my son, manage his diabetes. But we also love Clarity, the diabetes management software system from Dexcom. It's an easy way to keep track of the big picture. I check it about once a week, and it really helps me dial back and see longer-term trends, and it helps me not to overreact to what happened for just one day or even just hour, because I can do that. You get an overlay report, and that helps put context to patterns, and then we just send Clarity reports right to our care team, and they tell us it helps prioritize the real issues. I love Clarity. Find out more at diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. Two quick follow-ups and then right to Representative Roberts. Last week's episode, the one about diabetes and eating disorders, it was extremely popular. Thank you so much to those of you who shared that. Really important information and so much hope and help there from Aaron Akers. Really, but it was very popular in terms of how many people listened, which is very heartening. I want to let you know they're having a conference. The Diabulimia Helpline is having its first international conference on diabetes and eating disorders. This is in November in New Orleans. I will put all the information on the site and the show notes. If this is something that you'd like to learn more about, please check it out. Very easy to find, and it's the first time they're doing this. I'm sure they'll get a great response, especially if the interest in the episode is anything to go by. And a big congrats to my guest from earlier this year, fitness trainer Christel Oerum, who you'll recall, she was talking about her bike and, riding all over Denmark, and then she moved to LA. Well, she just became an American citizen. So congratulations to Christel and to her husband. I really think that is such great news, and it was wonderful to see their smiling faces on Facebook. Congrats and welcome once again. They've been here for a while, but I guess we could officially welcome them as citizens now. That's cool. Well, as an American, right, we're all supposed to learn the legislative process. And what we're talking about today, to be clear, is on the state level in Colorado. My guest is Representative Dylan Roberts. This is state-by-state legislation. There is a similar law to what we're going to discuss in Nevada that is already a law. Mississippi is working on a bill, and others may be in the works as well. But just to be crystal clear, this isn't in the U.S. House of Representatives. My guest this week is the youngest member of the Colorado House of Representatives. He was just elected this past November, and he has a personal connection to type 1. Unfortunately, it is a rather sad story. His younger brother, Murphy, was diagnosed with type 1 when he was 10 years old. And, he got an insulin pump. He was very active. He went to college. But Murphy died about a year and a half ago. He hit his head. He had been hiking. He had a seizure, and it was the head injury. Representative Roberts says this bill would not have saved his brother's life, but it is in his memory, and we talk about that. We do start by talking about the election and whether insulin pricing was the centerpiece of the campaign. Representative Roberts, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you spending some time to talk about this. Thanks for coming on the show.
Stacey, thank you so much. It's great to speak with you and be on your show.
So my first question is, you just got to the Colorado House of Representatives, in October of 2017. Was this candidacy all about insulin pricing and transparency, or were there other issues that you wanted to run and represent folks in Colorado about?
No, I made my campaign about a lot of different issues, as I think any candidate should. There's a lot of issues facing Coloradans and Americans in any state, and so I was talking a lot about some broader issues around healthcare, the cost of healthcare pricing, as well as non-healthcare issues, things like affordable housing and protecting the environment and transportation, and some of the nitty-gritty of state policy, but. This was an idea, I didn't talk about it openly on the campaign trail, but it was an idea that because of what was going on in the Nevada legislature while I was campaigning, that it was something I was monitoring and thinking about while I was campaigning for the seat.
Right. And so then when you got there, this is the first thing that you tackled. But this is not, I guess what I'm asking is, can you explain kind of what happens in Colorado? I don't know if this is the case everywhere else, but you can put legislation out right away, right?
So yes, every legislator in Colorado, and there are 100 of us, there's 65 representatives and 35 senators, and each member of the assembly, representatives and senators, can introduce up to 5 bills every legislative session. These can be bills that you write yourself. They can be bills that you work with a bill writer on. They can be bills that you work with different interest groups or constituents bring you ideas. So you're sort of welcome and free to come up with these ideas on your own, and then take ideas from other people, and then obviously partner with other legislators if you need to. And so every legislator gets their 5 bills, but you get to take one of those bills, and that can be your first bill that you introduce on the first day of the legislative session. So it's usually the bill that's the legislator's been working on during the off session the most, that they want to introduce first, or a bill that's really important to them or whatnot. But every legislator can pick one bill to be their first one introduced on the first day.
Okay, so you introduced HB 18-1009, the Diabetes Drug Pricing Transparency Act. What's in that? So
this bill is aimed at creating some transparency when it comes to the price of insulin. So it's not a price control bill. It's not a bill that would necessarily restrict the pharmaceutical companies or other people involved in the pricing, but it's a bill that would shed some light on what's behind the enormous price increases with insulin over the last few years. So briefly, the bill is pretty complex as far as the actual language, but briefly what it would do if it becomes law is it says that if you are a manufacturer who sells insulin in the state of Colorado, that if the price of that insulin goes up higher than the increase in the consumer price index for the previous year, then you would need to disclose what is going into that price increase. So you need to explain to consumers through the State Board of Health, through a report that you would have to file, how much you're putting in to manufacture the drug, how much you're putting in to do research, how much money you're putting in to do advertising, how much profit you're making. And just it would get down to the answer as to why you are increasing your prices that much over the previous year. And there's also some other parts of the bill that ask players like pharmacy benefit managers to disclose a few things about the way that they do business. And we're just trying to get at how do we arrive at this price and what's going into the increase in the price over the past year. And that's what's basically in the bill and what the end result would be.
Would there be penalties or any issues for the companies or the pharmacy benefit manufacturers that do not then hand over those reports?
Yes, the pharmacy or the manufacturers would be fined for every day that they're late on their report. So they would have a financial incentive to get that turned in.
All right, so let's step back a second and look at, why would something like this matter? What's the hope here that companies would be, embarrassed? I mean, I'm trying to think, as somebody we're all passionate about this issue. If we have more transparency, is it a question of then looking and seeing where the money's going, the companies justifying their costs? I'm trying to get to what we may see and what may eventually, make these companies change.
Yes, I think the sunshine that we would get on these companies' practices would be the benefit of this bill. Like I said, they're not going to be immediately forced to lower their prices. However, if they're having to explain to consumers who, and all of your listeners know that you have to purchase insulin, there is no other choice. If you have type 1 diabetes, you need to purchase that product. If they can explain to the consumers who are making those purchases why the price is going up, that they would either, one, show that there's a justifiable reason that the prices are going up, or if there's not, they would, need to face their customers and tell them that, hey, we're raising prices because we are raising prices and making more money. Mm-hmm. So I always like to say maybe there's a perfectly good reason why they're raising their prices, but they shouldn't be ashamed to tell their customers. And a good analogy that I've been using is if Nokia was selling those brick cell phones that were the first cell phones that were sold in the 90s today, and so that product hadn't changed, the technology of that product hadn't changed that much over the last 20 to 25 years. But if they were selling them for the same price as an iPhone X, nobody would buy it because it wouldn't be worth it. But because there's competition, Apple is able to come in and sell a phone at a different price. But in this case, these customers have to buy insulin. There's no other choice. And the manufacturers are selling a product that hasn't really changed that much in the actual product itself over the last 20 years for a price that's 1,200% higher than it was in the late 90s. So I think it's trying to get to the bottom of why that's the case is the intent of the bill and could be a first step at reining in some of these prices.
We'll get right back to my interview. Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. And have you ever tested your blood sugar with a meter and were unsure about the meaning of your result? Take the guesswork out of your numbers with the One Touch VarioFlex meter. It uses Color Sure technology to instantly show you when you or your loved one's blood sugar numbers are low, indicated by blue, in range, green, or high, red. So you can quickly get on with your life. You can also use the meter's built-in Bluetooth smart technology to seamlessly sync with the One Touch Reveal mobile app. Available now as a free download for Android devices on Google Play and Apple devices in the App Store. One Touch, because taking a step forward starts with seeing where you are. And now back to my interview with Representative Roberts. You have a very personal story that goes along with this. Your little brother was diagnosed in 2004 when he was 10, and he has died from diabetes, and I'm so sorry for that. Is this bill for him?
I had when thinking about this issue and working on this bill, I definitely there's nothing about this bill that would have saved his life. He passed away because he had a diabetic seizure, which when he was hiking, which caused him to fall and hit his head, and he died the next day from complications of that fall. And he was lucky, to have insurance through my parents. He was 22 years old when he died, and so he had access to insulin and was well insured and wasn't experiencing, the enormous price increases because insurance was covering it. But having a brother with type 1 diabetes, and all your listeners will know, it's a family effort when somebody gets diagnosed, and it was just something I was aware of throughout the course of my life. I was 14 years old when he was diagnosed, so I grew up with it as well, and just knew about insulin and knew about the daily struggle that comes with having type 1 diabetes. So he was on my mind, but also all the thousands and hundreds of thousands of kids like him who have type 1 diabetes, but who might not be so lucky to have the type of insurance to deal with these price increases.
And I know you've been watching what happened in Nevada last year, as you mentioned. Is that law, is your bill based on the law in Nevada? Are there major differences that we should talk about?
It's largely the same. It's based off the same premise and based off some of the same language. There are, differences that had to be changed just to match up Nevada statutes with, or change Nevada statutes to match up with Colorado statutes. But largely it's the same. It's asking for transparency from the drug manufacturers as well as the pharmacy benefit managers, and nonprofits who receive money from pharma. Those are the three key pillars, which were the same as the Nevada law that ended up getting signed by their governor.
I ask that because, and you are an attorney, so I could definitely talk to you about this.
I am.
Because the Nevada law is already facing lawsuits, right, from the insulin manufacturers. And they're saying, from what I'm reading, they're saying this is going to ruin our business. And that's the basis of the lawsuit. Are there measures within your bill that might protect against that? Or are you prepared to kind of defend it as they have to in Nevada?
I have inserted some language in my bill, some legal language that I hope would heed off a lot of the challenges that they're seeing in Nevada. Some legal language about trade secrets and proprietary information. However, if my bill does become law here in Colorado, I'm not going to hold my breath on not having a lawsuit. These companies have a lot of money to do that, and they have a business interest to do so. But at the end of the day, I don't agree with the premise of the lawsuit in Nevada and any potential lawsuit here. The information that the bill would ask for is not, in my opinion, protected by trade secrets. And, going back to the cell phone example, competition is normal in most markets. And nobody could get away with selling a Nokia brick cell phone for the price of an iPhone 10 these days. They would have to innovate and they would have to explain why it's worth paying more for this product. But because these companies in the insulin market, three of which have a substantial hold on the market, do not have to explain why their prices are going up, is not a normal economic model. And so I don't think asking them to give over some pretty simple information would be protected by any law. I'll just set it up like this. To speculate, so let's say we're talking about speculation here. There are some people who are saying that Lilly, for example, is seeing the writing on the wall. And while they're going to sue and they're going to fight this, they know that the price of insulin is probably going to be at least disclosed, transparency, regulation, and that's why they're getting into the device business. Maybe they can do some proprietary stuff. Do you agree with that? Do you think that this groundswell is actually to the point where there will be a difference made and that we may actually see some movement in the next year or two? I hope so. I will, always have that hope. But I'm not going to hold my breath. Like I said, I think, they have a product that people need, and they can make money from selling that product. And I am not disparaging the work that they do. Obviously, their production of insulin saves people's lives every single day. But the way that the price increase has gone over the last few years does not seem right to me. And that's why I think we need proactive legislation to try and get some ideas to why those prices are going up. I think Lilly will do what they want to do as far as innovation on the technology front, which is a good thing, hopefully. But I don't see them getting out of the insulin business, if that's what you're asking.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. I just think, the speculation is just that they're trying, there's going to be other ways to continue to expand the business. And, no, just some speculation there about what seems like a pretty cool product coming out from them. But with this legislation and with others, I'm curious, is there a precedent in healthcare? Do other companies or other manufacturers of product like this have to disclose, or is most of healthcare manufacturing and product manufacturing all this kind of black hole? Is it the same thing for blood pressure medications and heart pills, or do we not care because there are so many generics for that the prices are better in some ways?
So that's the thing. I think, there are drugs where there is not a generic or only one company produces it. And I think we saw with an example like the EpiPen, where you have a monopoly on the market, you can raise your prices because there's no competition. But I think that's exactly the problem in the insulin business is there is no generic. And there is a very tight hold by 3 very large companies on the production and distribution of insulin. So they are not, that allows them to increase prices at such a rate. If there were a generic, then there would be normal economic competition and prices would drop drastically with things like you mentioned, heart pressure medication and other things like that. And a lot of type 2 diabetes medication have generics and all types of competition, and the prices are very low. But with insulin for type 1 diabetics, that competition does not exist. So I think insulin is a unique drug, and that's part of why I made it my bill specific to insulin, is because I think it's a unique problem not shared by other prescription drugs.
So what happens to your bill now? Is it in committee? How does it work?
So, it'll go through the normal process, just like the Schoolhouse Rock video with the bill. It needs to go to a committee, and it got assigned to the Health Insurance and Environment Committee here in Colorado. And I'm still waiting on the specific date that the bill will be heard in committee, but that will happen in the next month. And then that committee votes on it, and then it would go to the House floor at that point for a full vote by all the representatives. And then hopefully it will pass out of that and go over to the Senate and go through the same process.
So how's the experience been, freshman congressman there in Colorado? I'm much more familiar with the North Carolina and New York legislatures, 2 houses I've covered in my broadcasting career. Have you been welcomed? Do they have any rituals for welcoming you to the House?
It has been, everybody has been very welcoming. It's been a great experience so far. We're on day number 7. We started last Wednesday. So just getting started, had my first committee hearing yesterday. Not too much hazing or rituals like that, although I am the youngest member of the Colorado General Assembly, and the Speaker of the House in her opening speech made note of that, and I got some laughs and some teasing from my older colleagues about being the youngest member. But everyone's very nice, and I'm enjoying it a lot so far, and working on this bill and a lot of other bills that I'm excited about. So it's been great.
That's terrific. And before I let you go, I know, we talked briefly about your brother. How are your parents doing? Is your family following your fight here? Are they, they must be really proud of what you're trying to do above and beyond just becoming a congressman.
Yeah. I think they're proud. They've been, I wouldn't be here without them. And obviously we all went through a lot and still are, coping with this new reality over the last year and a half. But, they're doing well. I think this has been a good opportunity to cope as well as maybe honor his memory a little bit. So I think they're very happy about it. And, they were down here when I got sworn in, and it was a nice day for the family to have a happy moment. So I am lucky to have them and all of their support.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for talking to me. I'll check back in with you. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Stacey. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
Timing being what it is possible that they have already started hearing more about this in Colorado, and there may have been action in other states as well. So again, I will keep you posted as much as I can, linking up information in the show notes and on the website, and also on social media. If things do change, I will certainly let you know there. And I think that, again, the Facebook group is really the best way to get any kind of breaking news that we have to put out there. But I'll link up as much as I can at diabetes-connections.com. My community connection this week features a previous guest with a brand new project. When I last spoke to Erin Spineto, she had published a great book. It was called Adventure On. What you need to know about Erin is that she is an athlete and an adventurer, as you'd notice from her book title. And if you didn't hear that first interview, let me just tell you a little bit about her. She has completed a 5-day solo sailing expedition, a relay swim around the Florida Keys. She paddled 100 miles along North Carolina's intracoastal waterway, triathlons, and she most recently did a project in the Turks and Caicos Islands with One Drop. It was One Drop Caicos, and she'll talk about that in the upcoming interview. But she just doesn't like to sit still. Of course, there's a lot more to it, and I will urge you to go back and listen to that first interview. She's got quite a story. But Erin's new project is an original comedy series about diabetes. A Bad Case is about 4 friends shown in 6 episodes. And here's a quote to give you some idea. Quote, "It is not some PC educational crap about fighting stereotypes and bringing a message of hope and happiness to the world. It is a dark comedy about when diabetes goes all wrong. It is purely for entertainment value and laughs." Well, after I got that email, I had to have her back on the show. I started by asking her, how do you get from outdoor sailing to a comedy about type 1?
After I wrote my first book, I've always kind of played around with writing screenplays. And I realized that I probably can't sell one off. So if I want to actually make that into a movie, I would have to do it. And instead of just jumping into, a 90-minute feature film, I figured I should take on something smaller. And a web series is, totally doable with very little budget and just a few friends and kind of just going at it. So I thought I'd do that before I took on a feature film, just to make sure I like the process.
That's really interesting. How did you come up with the idea? Is this something that you've wanted to do, as you said, to write a screenplay for a while? Have you always been interested in the arts that way? I know you're a teacher.
Yeah, I suppose. I haven't always. It just, after writing a book, I just went on to something new. I've always loved movies. Just absolutely loved them. Loved the story behind them. And I've always kind of put myself to sleep by writing movies in my head. You tell yourself a story, you write a movie pretty much. You watch it in your head each night as you go to sleep. And so I decided, well, if I'm doing that, I might as well put them down on paper and see what I can do with it. So I started learning about the form and just reading everything I possibly could and kind of really enjoyed it.
Okay, so tell me what A Bad Case is. I know it's not about sweetness and light, but what's the vision here?
So a while back, probably a couple of years back, I saw an odd little clip of a Japanese language film that was also a workout video. And the phrase that they were teaching you in this clip was, "I have a bad case of diarrhea." Just the strangest thing ever. And these ladies are dancing to it and teaching you how to say it in English.
Wait. Okay, just to slow down for a quick second. You're watching a workout video that is also teaching someone English? Teaching people who speak Japanese English, and the phrase they choose is "a bad case of diarrhea"?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I heard you right.
Exactly what you have to know. Yeah, that's what you need to know. If you're coming to America, you need to know how to say "I have a bad case of diarrhea."
Well, I suppose it could come in handy.
Over and over.
Okay, so you're watching it.
After a while, it starts sounding like I have a bad case of diabetes. And I'm thinking, what would that really look like? Because everybody's like, oh, well, do you have the bad type or the good type? Or you're thinking, that's just crazy. But what would a bad case of diabetes look like? What would be the worst possible comedic moment that diabetes could jump up in? So the plot comes with, there's 4 friends who are playing a game of ping pong. and chatting about this and coming up with these ideas of where could it actually hit the worst. So in the pilot, there's a guy who happens to be running from the cops at the moment. You know, he's wanted for murder. The cops find him. They're chasing him down the street, and he's trying to hide. He gets away a little bit. They lose him, and they come around a corner, and they just see his feet. And then a couple of test strips and a couple of sugar tabs. And he's sitting there completely sweating buckets on the ground, can't move because he's low. He ends up getting caught for murder because he gets a low right in the worst possible moment.
Right.
So they end up catching him because he's got a bad case of diabetes. So each episode has a different little take on what that moment could be. It's a bit crass, and it's, you know, we're taking on stuff of the worst stuff. You know, what happens if your legs go completely numb? How could that be the worst possible case where you could have that moment? You know, at a fancy dinner, and there's just all these different moments that you can come up with where it would really just kick your butt.
Well, I'm laughing, but, you know, it really is. Obviously, it sounds really funny. So what are you looking for? I mean, you sound like you have the script. I know you're looking for the cast. Are you looking for a location? Do you know where you're going to be filming this? Or I guess I should say taping this at this point. Or I don't even know what it is anymore with digital. Gosh, I'm showing my age.
Right. Yeah, I guess we call it taping now, but there's no tape either.
Yeah.
So filming, yeah. So I'm looking for the cast, so the 4 main leads who also play each one of the parts in the little skit moments. We're going to be filming in San Diego, hopefully by March. So I'm looking for people who can, you know, either live close by or who could travel for a weekend. It's going to be, for the pilot, just 1 weekend shoot. The series, if we get to it, with all 5 episodes, would be filmed over maybe 2 or 3 additional weekends. And I'm just looking for people who want to come and hang out with a bunch of people with diabetes and just laugh and put together an amazing production.
Do you have a production company already?
Well, I'm going micro budget, small production. Me, a couple other people have stepped up to kind of, you know, hold the mics and get the lighting. And it's very micro budget film where it's, you know, a crew of 2 or 3. And the cast, when you're not acting, you're going to be jumping in and helping on the crew in a very small sort of production thing.
Well, listen, I know you can get something like this done if you can get your other projects done, sailing solo and doing these other things. The last time I talked to you, you were just a couple of weeks or months away from a big project with One Drop. How did that go? It was in the Caicos Islands, right?
Right. Yeah, that was an amazing trip. So much fun. So it ended up being 3 women, and we went out to, you know, Turks and Caicos, and we paddled for 2 days. We hiked all around the entire island. We biked around the entire island. Just had a great time. And I think one of the best things about this trip was the conversations we had were, I think, particularly useful. Just because you're not always around people who are adventuring with diabetes. So the conversations of, you know, how are you dealing with this? How do you deal with carb ratios? How do you deal with your insulin before going out on, you know, 8 hours of paddling? And we all came from different angles. And it was nice to get together and have those conversations while paddling and hiking. And, you know, there's a lot of talking that goes on in the sport.
How is it different from, I mentioned just a couple of things you've done. You know, you did a similar project in was it the Outer Banks, or it was really the Intercoastal of North Carolina, right?
Yeah, it was the Intercoastal, yeah. So we didn't have to deal with waves, which is kind of nice.
I was just going to say, what was the difference between, obviously, the Caribbean?
Yeah, that's a good, I think a lot in the last 3 years before I'd done that, I'd studied on leadership. I'm naturally a super quiet person. And I realized if I'm going to lead a team, I can't really just sit there and let the conversations come. So I looked into things like, you know, well, I have to lead this team. So I'm going to have to start the conversations and ask the questions and kind of push myself out of my safety zone and really try to interact so much. Because I naturally, especially when I paddle, like I just go silent. I just want to sit for hours and hours, not say anything. And I realized that that's probably not going to work if I really want to lead this group and make it the best possible experience for that time.
I always ask this horrible question, which is, you know, what's next when you haven't finished what's in front of you, which I know is a bad case. But are you thinking about, you know, your next outdoor adventure, or is this something that you're going to focus on the comedy for a while?
So it's my big adventure this year is the comedy series, but I'm also always up for these little, what I call micro adventures. the ones that are a weekend long that you don't have to take off work, that you don't cost big budget. So I just finished up a hiking weekend up in San Luis Obispo with one of my friends. I'll probably be I'm thinking about a 2-day paddle from my old hometown to where I live now, which is about 50 miles. So just a 2-day paddle trip. And then always, hiking weekends I'm up for. I have a friend of mine who loves to just go out for a quick weekend. So we're thinking about a couple different little things like that. And then I think the following year, I might go back to long-distance paddling, possibly in the Florida Panhandle.
Oh, wow.
Just looking at a couple different crazy ideas up and around that area.
Well, keep us posted on all of that. And I definitely want to have you back on once you've taped or filmed or whatever we're calling this, digitized. But once you've got the web series, let's talk again and, talk about where it's going, where people can see it and all of that. But I think it sounds like a lot of fun. Before I let you go, if people do want to audition, do they send you something? How do you do that?
So luckily they don't have to fly out to San Diego to audition. They can do a self-taped audition with all the information that's on my website, and they can just send that to my email, and I'll take a look at all those and pick a cast. Very
cool. Definitely keep us posted, and thanks for checking in. I'm always excited to see some new stuff, and this sounds like it's going to be really fun.
For sure. I hope so.
I will link up the info to learn more and send in your audition. Now, to be clear, the pilot is not funded. This is going to be volunteer work if you want to be in the pilot. But Erin is hoping to secure funds and sponsorship and pay for the remaining episodes and pay her actors for the episodes. So this is a project done with heart, let's say, not to make a million. It is fun stuff. I'm glad she's doing it. I can't wait to see how it turns out. It is time for our Know Better segment, and I want to let you know this week about a project to open up the Omnipod insulin pump. And this segment is brought to you by No Foods. No Foods is the leading provider of grain-free food products. And when we're talking about grain-free, these are amazing products. Things like bread slices, waffles, donuts, muffins, pancake mix, pasta. If you are gluten-free, if you are trying keto, if you just want something that is low glycemic index and is an alternative to traditional breads and things like that, I highly recommend No Foods. My doctor recommended I go gluten-free about 2 months ago now, maybe just a little bit over that. And I was dreading giving up that bready stuff, right? Muffins or, I don't eat a lot of donuts, but there are some times when you just want that bread. And No Foods has really helped me make the transition in a way where I don't feel like I'm missing out. It's really been an eye-opening experience. Use the promo code Stacey10, STACEY, the number 10, Stacey10 altogether, at nofoods.com and get a 10% discount. The link's on the website, Diabetes-Connections. Just look for the No Foods logo. You've probably heard about the Open APS system, the Open Artificial Pancreas System project. This is a way to make the technology that some are using widely available. It's basic overnight closed-loop technology, and it is, as they say, widely available to anybody with compatible medical devices who is willing to build their own system. You may have seen the hashtag #WeAreNotWaiting. This is part of that thinking. But OpenAPS, the programming that is most common, needs a certain type of pump. Basically, it needs a pump that doesn't have this little security code in it. And that, I'm really short-handing this, but it really means an older version Medtronic pump. Well, there are a lot of people for whom tubed pumps just don't work. They don't like them. They don't want them. It's not something that will work for them. But you can't use an Omnipod for an APS right now, for an open APS. So I want to tell you about something called OpenOmni.org. This is really interesting. A group of people have placed a bounty, a reward, on a working accepted plugin for the Insulin Omnipod to be part of the Open APS project. So basically they're looking for somebody who can crack the code and make that open source software communicate with an Omnipod device. They say that if more than one person gets it, they can split the funds or they can give everything to charity. The website is OpenOmni.org. You can learn more about OpenAPS as well. I will link that up in the show notes. I'll link up the OpenOmni website. Now, this has been all over social media enough that Insulin must know about it. I don't think I'm telling any tales out of school. It will be interesting to see as we go forward if this group is able to reward the bounty. If somebody comes up with a way to basically hack into the Omnipod, although I hate that word hack because they're trying to help here. And I know that the OpenAPS system and looping has helped so many people. So again, more information online. If this is something that you find more about, you're interested in, let me know. I'm curious to see how it progresses. We've never used the Omnipod. It's just not something that appealed to Benny, but I know many people love it. And I just want to keep you posted on that part of the community. When you step back and realize that the vast majority of people with type 1 don't wear an insulin pump, and then you look at the vast majority of people who wear an insulin pump who would never consider using any sort of open source or, building their own, I still think that this is important, not for the number of people who will use it, but for the way it shows what can be done, the way it pushes things ahead. It really is incredible, and there's no doubt in my mind that OpenAPS and the Night Scout project and all of that has pushed the technology that we're lucky enough to use ahead by leaps and bounds. So I'll keep you posted as much as I can, but now you know better. Lots of travel and events coming up for me in February. I've got an event in Charlotte to talk about camps, and it's fun. It's a big bowling event where the kids bowl and the parents talk about camp. Yeah, it is diabetes camp time, or at least time to sign up and start thinking about that. Wow, it's so early. In March, I will be first in Greensboro at a JDRF event there, and then I will be in the Chesapeake Bay area. I'm really excited. I haven't been there in a long time to talk about tweens at a JDRF summit, because I am now an expert on tweens now that my type 1 kiddo is a teenager. Oh, and then in April, I'll be in Orlando at a women's event. And much more to come. I'm going to be at Friends for Life this summer for sure, and possibly the Falls Church, Virginia event in October. I'd really like to get back to that one. I missed it last year. If you'd like me to come speak at your event, just drop me a line, Stacey at diabetes-connections.com, Stacey. I do a Diabetes Connections talk all about making real life connections at home, how to do it. I also talk about social media, using it to thrive with type 1, not to live in fear, which can happen in some of these big groups. And I also do a talk that I just love about moms and daughters. It's called She Just Doesn't Get It. And that one is all about trying to talk to your teenager or knowing when not to talk. Because I have a 16-year-old who doesn't have type 1, but man, your teens can be tough nut to crack sometimes. That is the understatement of the year. Let's leave it at that. Hey, thanks for joining me. Thank you, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. And thank you for listening. It is a privilege to spend an hour each week with people who get it, who speak the language. I say that, but when I talk to guests like the representative today, like Representative Roberts, I'm always able to tell them this is a show about type 1. People are familiar with the language, and they're always so relieved that they don't have to explain everything. It makes a big difference when you're with people who really understand. I'm Stacey Sims, and I'll see you back here next week.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.